At the end of the Dressrosa arc, the narrator of the One Piece manga stated that the Straw Hat Grand Fleet will cause a historic incident in the future. Almost 300 chapters later, the narrator reveals that an incident will happen on Egghead Island that will shock the world. This video will go over the idea of these two incidents being in fact the same thing, and that the Straw Hat Grand Fleet is going to engage Kizaru and his forces at Egghead. The situation in the Egghead arc is currently shaping up to be an all-out war. The Marines have currently amassed a fleet of over 100 ships off the island. For comparison, a single Buster Call is only 10 ships. The fleet is also led by an Admiral and a member of the Gorosei. As the Gorosei have the highest authority over the Seraphim, this likely means that S-Hawk, S-Snake, S-Bear and S-Shark are also all at the Marines' disposal. This is also not accounting for all of the yet unknown forces that could be part of the fleet. While Vice Admirals are usually not particularly strong, there are exceptions among them. As the fleet that's heading for Egghead is being reinforced by Marines who are stationed in the New World, they could also be much stronger than the Vice Admirals the Straw Hats have encountered in the earlier story. There is also a chance that Saint Saturn brought more Seraphim with him, such as other clones of former warlords or potentially other strong people whose lineage factor the government has access to. Arguably, this hypothetical assortment of Marines and other soldiers would be the largest military force we've ever seen the world government deploy outside Marineford. This could also be exactly why the Egghead Incident would have historic proportions. If Luffy were to crush this fleet and simultaneously display all of the military power he possesses, it could be the biggest loss the government has ever suffered in the story. They would also not be able to stop the news from spreading to the public. The government after the reverie has already soured their relationship with the World Economic Times, the leading newspaper of the One Piece world. The president, Big News Morgans, has also already demonstrated that he is a fan of the Worst Generation and Luffy, even building him up as an Emperor of the Sea before anyone else. Morgans is also connected to Stussy, who on Egghead has become an ally of the Straw Hats. In theory, now that she's turned on the government, Stussy has both the means and the motive to report whatever is going to happen on Egghead to the world via Morgans. Taking a leaf from Morgans, you should click the like button for this video so that it too will be spread across the world. Now that the scenario of the Marines being defeated on Egghead has been established, this next part of the video will discuss how and why the Straw Hat Grand Fleet would be involved in this battle. At the end of the Dressrosa arc, before the Grand Fleet captains went their separate ways, each of them were given a piece of Luffy's Vibra card. Luffy also told them that if he were ever in trouble, the Grand Fleet captains could come and help him. However, this brings up an issue. The battle on Egghead Island is happening very suddenly and with only the Straw Hats and the world government being aware of it. Even if the Grand Fleet captains were to somehow find out what's going on, the Egghead Incident is happening within 24 hours. As they were all last seen in different parts of the sea, it would be very hard for them to reach Egghead in such a short time. The answer to this problem could however be found in Luffy's fight against Kaido in the last arc. Before awakening Gear 5th, Luffy was seemingly killed by Kaido on the Onigashima rooftop. Back in the pre-time skip, we saw with Ace that when someone dies, their Vibra card is burned away. While Luffy later returned to life, it could be that his dying caused the pieces of Vibra card held by the Grand Fleet captains to all burn up. It goes without saying that this would cause great concern in the Grand Fleet captains. While they could later see that Luffy was indeed alive based on the newspaper reporting his deeds on Wano, they could still all decide to head for Wano to confirm the situation. This could be for a couple of reasons. They could simply want to see that Luffy is alive and well with their own eyes, or they could just be coming so that they can receive a new Vibra card to replace the one that was burned up. If this were to happen, it would mean that the Grand Fleet would come to Wano after the Straw Hats have left. As they're essentially allies and Kinemon already met the Grand Fleet on Dressrosa, he'd tell the Grand Fleet that Luffy's left Wano. After this, the Grand Fleet would simply follow the Thousand Sunny to Egghead. Since the Egghead Incident is happening on the second day after the Straw Hats' arrival to the island, this would essentially mean that the Grand Fleet would be following Luffy's trail one day behind him. The video will next discuss why the Grand Fleet's involvement in the Egghead arc could be good for the story. The most important reason for this could be a setup for the final war that will likely happen at the end of One Piece. For reference, Whitebeard, who was told what was on Laftel by Roger, was convinced that the person who'd learned the true history of the world would challenge the world government to a fight. As the person who will find the One Piece is likely to be Luffy, this would mean that he would face off against the government after becoming Pirate King. If this were to happen, Luffy would naturally be assisted by the Grand Fleet. However, to be able to contribute in the final war, the Grand Fleet captains would have to be far stronger than they were during Dressrosa. Based on their last showings in the manga, none of the captains are comparable to even the middling Straw Hats like Frankie and Robin. If the captains were to get good feats now during the Egghead arc, it would make their eventual involvement in the final war a lot more believable. On the combat side of things, the Grand Fleet arriving on Egghead could also make for one of the most unique action set pieces in the story. Despite the One Piece story being set in a world made up of mostly water and the plot revolving around seafaring, there is a considerable lack of naval battles in the manga. When they occasionally happen, such as when Roger fought Shiki or when Jack tried to rescue Doflamingo, the action is skipped. The closest the story's gotten to an actual naval battle was during the second half of Whole Cake Island, when the Straw Hats had to fend off Big Mom's fleet when trying to escape her territory. The Egghead arc could be where the story's first naval battle between two fleets would occur. As mentioned before, the Marines have mobilized over 100 ships against the Straw Hats on the island. The Grand Fleet on the other hand is made up of almost 70 ships. If these two fleets were to clash, it would provide a completely new type of action scene to the story. This set piece could also be further complemented by features unique to Egghead, such as the mechanized sea kings that inhabit the waters near the island. Outside combat, Egghead could also be the right place to reintroduce some of the Grand Fleet characters to the story for plot purposes. Based on its ties to ancient history and Robin getting to reunite with Saul, the Straw Hats are likely to sail for Elbaf in the near future, perhaps even in the next arc. If this were to happen, Hajrudin could accompany the Straw Hats to the Kingdom of the Giants and serve as their guide. On top of being a native of Elbaf, Hajrudin is also the founder of the new Giant Warrior Pirates. Based on chapter 1076, the original Giant Warrior Pirates of Dory and Rocky have reassembled and they are currently on Elbaf. However it would happen, these two generations of giant pirates meeting and interacting on Elbaf could have a lot of story potential. Hajrudin's actual role in coming with the Straw Hats to Elbaf could however be tied to Big Mom. The plot point of Big Mom's lost memories of what happened to Mother Caramel and the orphans still hasn't been addressed in the story. Based on what we know, the only characters who know the truth are Seraphim and the Elbaf Giants. Hajrudin and his crew are also not just any giants. They were actually present when Lin herself was on Elbaf over 60 years ago. As Big Mom could still be alive and she still wants Luffy's head, she could follow the Straw Hats to Elbaf. However it would happen, Hajrudin has the potential to play a key role in the future of Big Mom's character. Another important member of the Grand Fleet for the present story is Bartolomeo. During Whole Cake Island, Bartolomeo ended up raiding one of the New World territories that were under Shanks' protection. Later, Shanks himself says that he wants to deal with Bartolomeo for what he did. As the face-off between Luffy and Shanks is on the horizon, Bartolomeo's strife with Shanks could actually be used to set up the clash between the Straw Hats and the Red Hair Pirates. Aside from setting up future arcs, there are also things the Grand Fleet could be involved in specifically on Egghead. As Vegapunk has seemingly used gigantism on the Seraphim, it would be interesting to see what an actual giant in Hajrudin would think of his experiments. As Vegapunk is one of the most knowledgeable characters in the story, he could also shed light on Cavendish's condition. For context, Cavendish is taken over by an alternate personality of Hakuba when he falls asleep. Hakuba's personality is completely different from Cavendish's, with him even being willing to attack Cavendish's friends. Even in the strange and supernatural world of One Piece, Hakuba is a very unique existence and has yet to be given any in-story explanation. While it might seem trivial at first, Hakuba could inadvertently end up telling us something about one of the story's most important characters. One additional reason for the Grand Fleet being involved in the Egghead arc is the potential for their ranks being bolstered by the new allies the Straw Hats have made on the island. While Luffy generally doesn't go about recruiting people to the Grand Fleet, for example, the allies he made on Wano and Zou stayed in their countries, the situation on Egghead is completely different. Because of Vegapunk's knowledge on the ancient history, the world government has decided to treat the residents of Egghead like those of Ohara. In other words, all of them are to be hunted down and eliminated. Because of this, the people of Egghead cannot stay on Egghead. Vegapunk himself has realized this and wants to escape the island with the Straw Hats. From what we've seen though, Egghead has far too many people for all of them to fit on the Sunny. In this sense, the Grand Fleet would have more than enough room to evacuate the civilians. This could also lead to the formation of the 8th Division of the Grand Fleet, made up of the Punks, Stussy, and Sentomaru. While on the topic of recruitment, the question of Lucci and Kaku must also be addressed. Due to the Seraphim attacking them, Lucci and Kaku have ended up teaming up with the Straw Hats. Personally though, I do not think this is set up for a further alliance. The reason why Lucci and Kaku were attacked was not on the world government's orders, but because York ordered the Seraphim to exterminate everyone on Egghead except her and Stella. After the situation has cleared up, perhaps after Saturn gives the Seraphim new orders, Lucci and Kaku could simply turn on the Straw Hats again. Furthermore, Lucci evidently still holds a grudge over Luffy because he beat him at Enies Lobby. Him actually becoming Luffy's subordinate in the course of a couple dozen chapters would be both unlikely and very abrupt. Finally, I will address a few points as to why the Grand Fleet might not be involved in the Egghead arc. The biggest problem with this idea lies in the Grand Fleet journeying from Wano to Egghead. As they have no way of knowing where Luffy went after Wano, it's just as likely that they would go to Elbaf or Winter Island instead of Egghead. While the Grand Fleet could theoretically split into 3 and head for all 3 islands, only a third of them showing up on Egghead would rather defeat the purpose of this being their big moment, as said by the narrator. However, this does not completely debunk the idea of the whole fleet coming to Egghead. They could simply intercept marine communications via Black Denden Mushi and realize that the massive fleet is heading for Egghead. In other words, that is likely where Luffy is. Another caveat to the Grand Fleet facing off against the Marines on Egghead is that the Straw Hats might simply not need their help. At the moment, the core Straw Hat crew as a whole have already shown themselves to be superior to a Yonko crew like the Beast Pirates. They also already have other allies in the area such as Stussy and Bonnie, with more like Kuma potentially on the way. In this sense, the Grand Fleet also coming could make the arc less interesting as it would make things too easy for the Straw Hats. Still, this could also serve as the reason why the Egghead Incident is so important, as it would show just how big of a threat Straw Hat Luffy is to the government. Personally, I think the biggest argument against the story going this way is just that. It could make the government look too weak. If the final war between Luffy and the world government is to happen, it could be far more compelling if the government is as threatening as possible. It might be better for the story to start building up how strong their forces are rather than having them suffer a catastrophic failure on Egghead. Still, considering that the story is in its final saga and that we're currently running out of arcs, there may not be a lot of opportunities left for the incident involving the Grand Fleet. Even if it came at the expense of the Marines, the potential positives outlined in this video could make it worthwhile. If you'd like to see more content about Dressrosa characters, you should check out this video, where I go over how the events of that arc could have led to Trafalgar Law's awakening. Thanks for watching the video to the end.